Hello and welcome back to What's in the Making, where I'm Millie and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. Today's video is Knitting Podcast episode 10, aka the last podcast episode for 2024. I do think this is going to be a slightly longer one again, so I'll try to stay on topic and maybe I will talk a little bit faster than I usually talk because I can talk pretty fast. I'm from New Jersey, what do you expect? Anywho, I have some finished sweaters, some sweaters that are pretty close to being done, and I have some new cast on that are not garments because in 2025 I really want to get back to knitting some smaller projects or some non-sweatery projects because I love my hand knit sweaters, I love making them, I love wearing them, but I also love the other accessories and I get a ton of wear out of the ones that I have, and I'd like to add more to my closet or repertoire. So without further ado, let's just jump into finished objects. My first finished object was an almost finished object. Last time I had just ripped out the neckline bind off and wanted to redo it, and I did. So this is the Terrazzo sweater by Petite knit. This is a top-down contiguous sleeve sweater knit at a worsted weight gauge. I'm fairly certain I used a 5mm needles. So if you've never knit a contiguous sleeve construction, you start off knitting flat and you do some shoulder shaping like around for this area, and then you eventually knit in the round and you do knit the rest of the yoke in the round, and you work increases at different rates for the body and the sleeve. So it's kind of similar to a raglan construction, however the shaping more closely resembles the shape of your body versus a raglan like the one that I'm wearing features just like straight lines down if it is just a plain raglan. So like I said, this is my second time knitting this sweater and I really enjoy the fit of it, so I'm happy to have another one in my closet. It is all stockinette except for the ribbing, which is half twisted rib. So generally, I'm not the biggest fan of half twisted rib, but I think in this sweater, it's a really nice detail, and I don't know, I think the yarn combination, the tweedy yarn looks nice in the twisted rib, which brings me to my main modification, which is my neckline. So the way that the neckline is written, you knit it in fully twisted rib because when you knit half twisted rib, you are only twisting your knit stitches. So the right side of the fabric looks like twisted ribbing. When you flip it inside out, the wrong side of the fabric just looks like regular ribbing because you didn't twist your purls. But because of the way that this sweater is written, because of the really long neckline, you fold it over and you do see the wrong side of the fabric. So you need to knit fully twisted rib so that they match up. What I realized is the first few centimeters of the ribbing in the neckline, I'm never going to be seeing the wrong side of that fabric while wearing it. So I knit that as half twisted rib because it's just easier on my hands. And then the top 2/3 of the neckline, I did do the fully twisted rib so that when it's folded over, you do see the twisted ribbing. I don't think I have anything else to say about this sweater. I did talk about it in my last podcast episode. I was just interrupted. I'm trying to remember what I was saying last. I don't think I really have much to say else about the construction of the sweater. I guess we can talk about the yarn. So honestly, the yarn combination is why I was first attracted to this sweater in my early days of knitting. It's because of Petite knit yarn combination. So she knits this with a strand of Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo, which is the worsted weight version of that yarn. No, it's a sport weight version of the yarn. There's also a worsted weight version. So it does have like one background color, but then you have a bunch of different multicolored tweedy bits in the yarn, and it's such a pretty design. I really like it. I think it's my favorite tweed yarn, and the colorway that I used in the sweater is different from the one that Petite knit used. I want to say it's Ome or Osaka. I kind of get the names confused, but it will be somewhere on the screen, and it's also linked in my Ravelry project page for this sweater. And then I held it with a strand of silk mohair from Lili Loops in a bubblegummy pink colorway. My total cost for this project was pretty good because I did get most of the Noro on sale last year during Black Friday. So I got 3 balls for $40 from Red Beauty Textiles. I'm unfamiliar with the shop, but I'm fairly certain I bought this on the shop app, which like a lot of retailers, if they use, I think, like Shopify, then their app shows up, then their store shows up on this app, and when you purchase, you get like 1% cash back. And during the holidays, a lot of times they have like bonus offers. So I'm fairly certain I used some sort of bonus offer. They had a Black Friday sale, they had free shipping, and I got a really good price on the yarn. Then I had to buy one more ball this year because I didn't have enough to finish the sweater from Yarn Garden, Michigan, which cost me $30 because of shipping. And then the 3 balls of silk mohair cost me $75. So my total cost for this sweater was $145. I was about to say 145 sweaters, which is pretty average for me, and I am happy with that price. And I think this is such a nice sweater, especially because I think the Noro is like wool, mohair, silk. Obviously, I have a mohair silk. It's like, when you think about it, it's a very luxurious fiber blend. So yeah. Oh, one thing is, so when I cast this on, this was a little bit of a side cast on because I cast it on the day after the election. But since then, I have more positive memories associated with the sweater because I knit the first sleeve while watching Wicked for the first time. I knit the second sleeve while watching Wicked for the second time. And I had actually knit part of the body while watching Conclave at the movie theaters. And I'm going to see Wicked again this weekend. And I'm going to wear it. So this is fully associated with Wicked in my mind. This is like my Glinda pink Wicked sweater. The downside of knitting at the movie theaters is that I can't see my knitting and I'm not looking at it while working on it. So I did drop a stitch on the sleeve, and then there's one spot in the back where I knit with the mohair but I dropped the wool, so it looks a little bit empty there. I put in stitch markers in both spots, and because I did sewn bind offs for all my bind offs, after I weaved in the ends, I had like quite a bit of, I had like these long yarn tails that I just cut off. So my plan is to go back over those spots and use my leftover yarn tails to close up those gaps. So yeah, that is my first finished object. Maybe I'll wear this on my next episode. My next finished object I don't have with me because it was a gift knit, and it is the White Mountain Sweater by Midori Hirose, but I did take a lot of like pictures and videos while knitting it, so I will intersperse those while I talk about this project. So I knit this as a gift knit for my brother. If you saw my last episode, you might remember me ranting a little bit about how a lot of patterns are poorly tagged on Ravelry. Like, they'll be tagged as male or unisex, but there's nothing in the description about if they need to be modified to fit a male body, and there's nobody pictured in like the pattern photos who is male or like male presenting wearing the sweater. So it's kind of hard for me to know how it would fit on a male person. Thankfully, this pattern does have a male presenting person wearing the sweater. Also, it's a sweater written with a lot of positive ease, which I think presents itself to being a little bit more unisex. So it is a top-down raglan. It is a compound raglan, which means that there's different increasing rates for the body and the sleeves. And instead of getting the straight sleeves you get with a straightforward raglan, you get more of a curved shape. And similar to the contiguous sleeve sweater, it just more closely mimics the natural shape of your body. And this sweater pattern is written where you cast on for the neckline and then you move straight into the body after working the neckline. And I did skip that step, and I generally do because I find when I do that, the neckline and from the weight of the sweater just tends to stretch out a lot more easily over time, versus when which is what I did in this case. So I just did a long tail cast on and started working the short rows and worked the body, and then after I was done with the body and sleeves, I went and picked up stitches for the neckline. And just like that, the added seam, I think, gives a lot of stability to the neckline, so it's less prone to stretching out from the weight of the sweater. Now, even though there was like a male person wearing the body, I did have to make some very, very slight adjustments. So I already said I cast on for the body instead of the ribbing. So I did cast on for a smaller size than I intended to make. because I did know I wanted the yoke depth to be a little bit longer and I wanted the upper arm circumference to be a little bit wider. So having a slightly longer yoke would help with that as well. And then also the sweater is written with a pretty wide neckline and I didn't want it to be that wide. So that was also the benefit of casting on for a smaller size. And then I knit everything longer. I knit the sleeves longer, I knit the body longer, I knit the yoke longer. So thankfully this sweater did have very extensive schematics. And then there was also one of the test knitters for the sweater knit the sweater for a man. Either the person who knit it is male, or the person knitted it for somebody else who was male. But anyways, they listed literally every single measurement from the schematic, which was so helpful for me because I just knit mine to be exactly the same as theirs. I think maybe I knit the body a little bit shorter because I asked on Instagram how long people knit sweaters for, male people who are the same height as my brother, and so many people came back with helpful responses, which I truly, truly appreciate. And yeah, I think I ultimately knit the body to about 65 centimeters, I think. And it ended up fitting him pretty well. And I knit mine on 6mm needles, and the sweater does have a few different needle options listed depending on what yarn combination you knit it in. So if you've ever knit any of Midori Hirose's patterns, they always list multiple yarn combination options, which I really, really appreciate. Since this sweater does have a 14 stitch gauge, they have different yarn combinations listed, and I knit mine with 1 strand of fingering and 2 strands of mohair. The fingering weight, or I guess technically sport weight wool I used, is Jill Draper Ansel, which I think is a discontinued yarn, but I'm sure they have similar yarns to this. It is a New York State grown, and then I don't know if it's milled in New York or it's milled somewhere in the US, but so it's like a fully New York grown and fully USA grown and milled yarn. This really, really pretty soft blue color, and it feels like next to skin soft. I am happy to have some left because I can make something for myself with it. And then I held it with 2 strands of mohair, and I did fade my mohair. So at the top, I started off with this neon green color. This is Little Sicilian Gecko by the Golden Pearls, and in my last episode I had shared my initial cast on where I was holding 2 strands of this green with the blue, and it was looking really, really neon-y, and I didn't like it, so I completely ripped it out and I started over the project. So the top of my sweater, I'm holding a little bit of this mohair left, but I don't know where I put it. Basically I was holding 1 strand of the Jill Draper, 1 strand of this green, and then 1 strand of this light blue, but not this exact one. I was actually using the Farmer's Daughter's fiber mohair, but I used all of that up because my plan was to fade from the green to a light blue to the more medium blue. But because a lot of the fading was happening in the yoke, I needed a lot more light blue than I initially planned. Thankfully, one of my local yarn stores had this Rowan Kid Silk mohair in the sky colorway, which is virtually indistinguishable from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers mohair when knit up. When you look at it, the Farmer's Daughter's Fibers one is slightly cooler. Like in a sweater, I really cannot tell any sort of difference. Like there's no line or anything where I switch from one mohair to the other. So that is my yarn, and yeah, initially when I started this project, I thought it was going to be like a very chill, laissez-faire, scrappy fade kind of thing. Like those hopes were dashed very quickly. I don't know what I was thinking because that is not my attitude when it comes to knitting most of the time. And I also just didn't have enough yarns for that kind of vibe to work. So instead, I spent time obsessively looking over other people's faded projects on Ravelry, and I ended up writing out like literally 83 rows. I wrote out exactly what mohair colors I was using and how I was fading them. So I went from like A B A B A B B B A B A B A B B B A B A B B B A B B B A B B B, you know, like just gradually adding in one color from the other. So initially I did want it to look completely smooth and like a gradient, but I quickly realized like holding 2 strands of mohair, it just wasn't going to work out like that with solid colors. If I really wanted it to be smooth, I would either have to be holding many more strands of mohair, or I would have to have like a stripe in between dissecting the fade, or I would have to be using speckling colors. Basically, what I had on hand, it was never going to be completely smooth in the way that I was knitting it. And I just had to embrace that. And I did. And I'm really happy that it all worked out in the end. There is like some striping towards the middle, but I think it looks very intentional. And I guess it was intentional. And it was kind of good that I was kind of anal about writing out the fading pattern that I used, because then when I knit the sleeves, I was able to more or less do the same exact thing. So it looks like very uniform when the sweater is worn. Like the sleeves match up to the body, which I really like. This did eat up a lot of yarn, and I think it is probably my most expensive sweater of the year. However, most of the yarn that I used is like deep stash. A lot of it I bought in the 2022 New Jersey Wool Walk when I first started knitting, and I was just buying yarn willy-nilly. I wasn't really thinking of how I would use it. I was like, this is a good deal, or this is a nice color, let me just buy it. I didn't think of how I'd use it, so I didn't have plans for this yarn. It was just sitting there in stash. So I'm glad that I was able to make a beautiful project out of it. The only yarn I ended up buying this month is I had to go to the yarn store twice to buy more of this Rowan Kid Silk Haze, I think is the name. Haze might be the color changing one. This is not the color changing one. It is the solid colored one. And I do really like this mohair, and I really love this sky color. It's such a pretty light blue. I would knit a whole sweater in this for myself if I could. But the Rowan mohair is quite pricey. This is $18 a ball, which is more expensive than a hand-dyed mohair. But their color range is so good. Their color range might actually be better than knitting for olives, but it's much more expensive. So I guess let's get into the cost of the sweater. So I didn't weigh the yarn, so all the cost is just assuming I had used the entire ball of yarn, because technically I had to buy the entire ball of yarn to make the sweater. Plus I have this ball of yarn left over from my initial cast on. I already did separate the strands from a lot of this, but I didn't want to separate more than I needed to, because it's kind of annoying, because this is a strand of fingering and 2 strands of mohair. I'm kind of thinking of knitting myself mitts with this, because I do have leftovers of mohair and the blue wool, and then I wouldn't have to worry about separating the strands of this, and I think it would be cute as a pair of mitts. And I did want to knit something for myself with the neon green. But yeah, let me get my notes on the cost of the sweater. So I used 1 ball of the Golden Pearls mohair, which I bought in the 2022 Wool Walk on sale for $27. And then another ball I got on sale of the Farmer's Daughter Fibers mohair during the same Wool Walk, also for $27. And then I used 3 balls of the Jill Draper Ansel that I got on sale during the 2023 Wool Walk for $72. Then I got 5 balls of the Isaiah Silk mohair on sale for 40% off. What a steal. During the 2022 New Jersey Wool Walk for $48. And then this month I bought 2 balls of the Rowan Kid Silk mohair for $36. So my total cost for this project was $210. But considering I used like 400 grams of mohair, I mean, I didn't use it all up, but if I had used up every single gram of it, I had to buy 400 grams of mohair basically to make this sweater, which is a lot of mohair. And I used a lot of hand-dyed yarn in this sweater, and any sweater that I knit for my brother was going to cost more than a sweater that I knit for myself, because he is taller. So everything that I made for him was going to be a larger size and longer. So with all those considerations in place, I'm very happy with the cost of the sweater, because I think the finished object came out beautiful and hopefully he enjoys it. One thing I realized while knitting this sweater, so this sweater does, I think I said it has a 14 stitch gauge. It kind of reminds me of the Doppio sweater that a lot of people are knitting, because that one I think is also knit with 2 strands of mohair and 1 strand of fingering weight wool, and it's supposed to be like a stash buster, and I think it's also written as a compound raglan. And before I cast on this project, I had also been looking at the Lento sweater, because that one is also written at a loose gauge. I didn't end up going for that one because I couldn't find any project. I mean, the pattern page in and of itself didn't have any male person wearing it, and then I couldn't find really any project pages of male people wearing it. Maybe I found like one or two. I wasn't sure about the fit of it, and I know people have said there's mistakes in the short row shaping for that. All that to say, all these raglan sweater patterns are very, very similar, and if you don't feel like purchasing all of them, you really don't need to. Like, the specialty about the Lento being at a looser stitch gauge, like if you have a different sweater pattern in your library that has that same stitch gauge, you can use the same combination and needle size to knit that sweater. Like, you don't have to, there's nothing specifically about the Lento pattern or like the Doppio pattern or whatever that yarn combination will only work for that pattern. I don't know if I'm saying this clearly, but hopefully you understand the gist of what I'm saying. Basically, if you have a similar pattern in your pattern library that has that same gauge and has a similar fit, you don't need to buy that new pattern if you don't want to. You can just, it's a pattern that you already have. Even if it's written for an Aran weight yarn, you can just use a fingering weight and a Surrey or 2 mohairs and a fingering weight yarn to hit that gauge. So yeah, that is the last of my finished objects. And hopefully what I said made sense. If you want to buy the patterns, like, God knows I have enough pattern repeats in my library that are very similar with like minute differences between them. But in this case, I am really happy with the White Mountains sweater. I'm sure the other patterns are perfectly fine as well, but I really like Midori Hirose's knitting pattern, and I like that it's tagged as a unisex pattern, and they do have a variety of bodies wearing it, and yeah, I already had it in my pattern library. Let's move on to works in progress. So that was the first of my gift knits, and then I have 2 gift knits that I did not finish, and I will talk about them briefly because I talked about them in the previous episode, and I will talk about that in the next episode when they're hopefully finished objects. Here are my other 2 gift knits. I will talk about this one first because I'm further along on it. This is the Joha Loop sweater by Other Loops. It is a top-down raglan sweater with a colorwork yoke and then a plain body. They have a bunch of different needle sizes listed in the pattern. I knit the majority of it on 6mm needles. I didn't switch needle sizes between the colorwork and the stockinette section because I find my gauge tends to be pretty consistent in colorwork. Sometimes it can actually be too loose. The sweater is written to have a ton of positive ease, and it does have a lot of positive ease on my dad. So he tried it on and he did say he wanted the bottom to be much tighter. So I did have to do some modifications. So there are these purl stitches along the body of the sweater. So what I did is, before I started the ribbing, I did some decreases along the outside of the purl stitches on each side of the body. And then I also, when I switched over to my ribbing needle, I did 1 row of rapid decreases. I think I decreased about 10% of the stitches. And I'm also knitting the ribbing on 4.5mm needles, and I'm knitting it quite wide. So hopefully it is really cinched in on the bottom because that was the look that he wanted. Aside from that, I don't think I have any other modifications. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this in my brother's sweater. So I made this modification in all the gift knits that I knit this year. So traditionally in circular yokes or raglan sweaters, you usually pick up stitches when you're doing your sleeves. My camera died, so I don't 100% remember what I was talking about in regards to this sweater. I think I was talking about the ribbing. Was I? I don't know. Anyways, I'm knitting the ribbing on 4.5mm needles because, yeah, my dad wanted it to be cinched in, and the tighter needles should help with that. And he also liked the longer ribbing that I did on the sleeves. So I knit the sleeves to pattern, and I thought they were looking kind of short. So then I ended up adding extra length to them, and then they also grew while blocking. So now they're too long, so I will have a grafting day at some point this week to make it shorter. The only thing is there's pretty regular decreases in the sleeve. I think I added like this much to the sleeve. That's not written in the pattern. So as long as I can remove some in between these 2 sets of decreases, because I think I did another set of decreases before I started the ribbing. As long as I can take out some of the fabric in between the 2 decreases, it should be fine. Yeah. And then I also realized I made a mistake in this. So there is a separate chart for the raglan stitch in this pattern, and I basically inverted it. It's supposed to be 2 white stitches, or like whatever color you use on the collar on the outside, and then the center stitch should be whatever color you use in the body, and I just inverted it. But honestly, I like the way it looks, so I'm happy with that. And I just remembered what I was talking about before my camera died. So what I did on this sweater is I cast on stitches for the sleeve instead of picking them up, and then I left a little bit of a longer tail, and then I just went and seamed the underarms together. I definitely did not do the best job at seaming. However, this is definitely much sturdier than when I pick up stitches, when I tend to get holes on either side of the pickup. Even when I like pick up extra stitches and reduce it, I'm never like fully satisfied with the way it looks. And same thing as I was saying like earlier with the neckline, having an extra seam just adds like more integrity to the sweater, and I think maybe there's a less likelihood of getting holes in the underarm when the seam is there, hopefully. And yeah, I think I should be able to get this sweater done before the new year because the ribbing should go by pretty quickly. I'm mostly just worried about the grafting, but if I tell myself like I'm dedicating a few hours simply to doing this task, I think I can get it done, because I actually also have to do the same thing to my, oh my god, to my mom's sweater. It is the Lume sweater by Starry Nordland. I won't really talk about it because I'm running out of time, and also I talked about it last time, and again I'll talk about it next time. I think the only thing I've done since last time is I added in the contrast color I-cord bind off to the sleeves, which was a modification I did because I saw somebody else's project on Ravelry do this and I really liked it. And this one I don't think, I'm kind of sad, I'm annoyed at myself that I took out the stitch markers where I did my decreases, but this one the decreases are definitely more spread out, so it should be easier for me to take out the fabric. I had also knit the neckline like 3 times in the sweater, and I didn't like the way it was looking each time, so I kept ripping it out. So my plan is to fix the sleeves, finish the body, and then I will do the neckline last because I can see how it sits on my mom and then decide how I want to do the neckline. So you may notice both of these sweaters are the exact same color. So I've had this piece fleece worsted in Volga Sibi Blue sitting in my closet for like 2 years, and most of the yarn in my stash doesn't stress me out, but something about this yarn stressed me out because I bought so much of it to make the Hannah sweater by Junko Okamoto, but after casting it on, I decided I didn't like the way it was looking. Okay, wait, it's looking kind of dark, so let me brighten this. Okay, hopefully that is a little bit brighter. So I bought this for the Junko Okamoto sweater. I cast it on, I didn't like it, and I also just like wasn't sure how this color looked on me. So yeah, I didn't have any plans for it, and it took up a lot of space because it's an Aran weight wool. And then on Thanksgiving, I decided, let me see if I can knit some sweaters for my parents with it, and I'm happy that I came out with 2 sweater projects that I really like the look of, and I got that yarn at a stash. I did end up having to order an 1/8 ball of it from the Woolly Thistle, and honestly, shout out to them for having such affordable, reliable, and speedy shipping during the holidays, because I think I ordered it on Monday and it arrived by like Wednesday or Thursday, so very, very quick. As much complaining I do about the piece fleece, they actually have very, very consistent dye lots. It looked like the newer skein, it might have been slightly lighter, so I did end up helically knitting it into the sleeves, but I honestly cannot tell a difference. I helically knit for like the majority of it, and then the ribbing on like the straight section was all in the new dye lot, and like I cannot tell any difference between this part and like the body, which is in the old dye lot. So even like years apart, their dye lots are that consistent. And in my last episode, I was complaining a lot about the piece fleece, and I do have the same complaints. I don't think it feels comfortable on my needles, especially when knitting cables or color work. However, when knit at a looser gauge for a stockinette, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't something I enjoyed, but it was something I could deal with. And I love the way the fabric looks once it's blocked out. It looks so nice. Like it very much gives me like heirloom vibes, because I was like looking at my dad's sweaters to get an idea of how I could get this one to fit. And he has like a lot of wool sweaters from like Brooks Brothers and J. Crew, and some of them are knit with like slightly chunkier rustic wool. And the piece fleece just gives such a similar vibe to the sweaters. And yeah, I really love the way that it looks. Like you got like this slight weediness or like marling bits, I don't know, but it's such a nice looking fabric. And I've also already talked about how I like the ethos behind the brand, so I take back my stance on never purchasing piece fleece again. I just won't use it for cables or color work. Like I could see myself knitting a lake sweater by Ozetta out of it, because they do have really nice heathery colors. Plus the ethos of the brand, plus affordability. It's just the knitting experience that I don't like. Okay, so that is the last of the gift knits. My goal is still to get them done by the end of the year, which hopefully I can do. My whips, I didn't work on my Ava cardigan at all, so I'm not going to show that. But I do have some new whips and some old whips that I've brought back. Okay, I do have one more whip that I talked about in my last episode. It is this Woolfolk anniversary bonnet, same progress that I had last time, but I found my missing bag that had the strap in it, and I still have made barely any progress on it. It's just kind of annoying to constantly work this like back and forth. I was knitting on it a little bit before bed last night, and the constant like adjusting of the needles is so annoying. When I was knitting on it, I was like, I'm fairly certain if I was knitting a sleeve, I would get the same amount of progress done as I did the same amount of time on these like tiny amount of sleeves, because it's so annoying to like constantly having to adjust the needles over and over again. So I gave in and I ordered a pair of DPNs from Joann's that I'm going to pick up tomorrow or tonight, I don't know. So yeah, hopefully this will be a finished object by the end of the year, because this has been on my needles since October. And it's such an easy project. Like this knit up in no time, but I have just been putting off knitting this strap because it has to be much longer. Like I don't even think I'm a third of the way through. So I couldn't find my DPNs. I just caved and bought a new pair. Yeah, I bought them from Joann's because they're much cheaper than buying them than the brands that they have at my local yarn store, and the ones at Michael's look terrible. Then I guess I can talk about my one old dark versus blinding. The old whip that I've brought back is an old sock project because I'll talk about why in my next project. But anyways, this is the Jack sock, which I cast on in July 2023. I'm fairly certain I knit most of this over a weekend, and then I just put it in a bag and I never looked back. But I really like this Hedgehog Fibers twist sock yarn. It is an 80% BFL, 20% nylon blend. Oh my god, it's getting so dark. What else is new? It is a BFL nylon blend, which is my favorite sock blend, and I have another pair of socks in the same yarn in a different color. I've been wearing the heck out of them, so I'm like, I have more of this yarn in stash, why don't I just make more socks? So this is the first of that plan. Hopefully I can get this done. This is the first, I think, toe up sock that I ever knit. The foot is a little bit big on me, but I'm sure it'll be fine. It's not so big that it's unwearable. It's just big enough that I think it'll be a little loose, and it kind of looks tight circumference wise, so maybe the extra length is needed, because once the sock stretches out it will shorten. And this stitch pattern is, like I said, it's from a free pattern called Jack, and it's a really easy pattern to knit. It has like these slip stitches, and this yarn color is so pretty. I think it's called Daisy Chain. Yeah, I am excited to have these socks back, and then after I finish, I might get bored knitting the exact same sock twice. So after I finish that, I do think I want to knit the second sock from my Ponyo socks. So I want to give this to my mom since I want to see how the afterthought hit I want to see how the Afterthought heel fits her. Let me flap a little. I want to see how the Afterthought heel fits her because we have the same size foot, but an Afterthought heel does not fit me very well. So if it fits her well, then I can give her other Afterthought heel socks because I like knitting the Afterthought heel. I just don't like the way it fits on me. So here's hoping that I get those sock projects done in January. A lot of people have been talking about their year of socks projects. I don't know if I'm going to give myself that goal again because I feel like I've been giving myself that. I definitely gave myself that goal last year and I gave up before June. Or maybe by June, I don't know. But I do have a lot of single socks and like partially knit socks. So if I bring those in, I'm kind of hoping maybe that makes it a little bit easier for me to knit, let's say 6 pairs of socks in 2025. 2 other whips for me to briefly talk about and actually why I brought out my sock projects. So I have my Christmas Eve and my Christmas Day cast on. So on Christmas Day, I cast on the Jigsaw Puzzle Blanket by Stephen West. This is my first time attempting to knit a blanket. This one is knit, you hold 2 strands of fingering or like fingering and lace. My camera died again, so I apologize if this is choppier than usual. I'm not holding this with Mohair because I want it to be machine washable and I wanted something to knit on while I was spending time with my family, and this is the project that required no thinking and I didn't have to wind up any yarn, so I cast it on. My goal, I think, is to knit 4 sections each month, so I got an early start on January. And then hopefully by next Christmas, I will have a finished blanket. I don't really like this color. That I'm using, but I had it in stash and better to use it in a blanket than something I will wear. It's Filcolana Arwetta, and I think the color Desert Rose. I lost the ball tag or yarn tag or whatever a long time ago. And yeah, it's very, very simple garter stitch. But that's kind of why I was inspired to bring my socks out again because I do have a lot of sock yarn and I do want to knit socks with it. So like I don't want to use that yarn to knit the blanket and then have leftovers and knit socks from the leftovers and then run out of yarn. I'd rather knit the socks first and then put the leftovers into the blanket. I do think I will still end up buying some maybe like Cascade Heritage for the blanket because I don't know if I want to use the variegated yarns in this blanket or not. I haven't really planned out the colors yet because I don't know if I want it to be like super scrappy and random or I want it to have some sort of like color palette or idea. And then I'll briefly talk about my Christmas Eve cast on. I can't really show it because I'm in the middle of the short rows, but on Christmas Eve I cast on the cardigan number 9, which I already knit once this year. It was in my most worn sweaters of the year and I cast it on in Mantelope in the really dark brown colorway, and then I'm holding it with a strand of this Drops Silk Mohair that is also deep stash. I'm fairly certain I actually bought this to hold with the Noro yarn that I knit my Eurus sweater out of. And again, like I used to find this super scratchy, but I think because it's so cold, like I'm not feeling any of the prickle factor. So yeah, that is my Christmas Eve cast on, and after I get my parents' gift knits on, I will get back to this. And I think that is finally the end of the whips. And I will very briefly show my Advent as my acquisition because I don't have any other I bought yarn, but it all went into the gift knits. So if you don't want to see the Through the Wardrobe Yarn Co's Advent calendar, it is time to look away. Here it is. This is the full gradient. I haven't decided what I want to knit with it yet, but I'm just admiring the colors for now. I'm not trying to rush myself into any project because I'm unsure about this and I'm really excited about some of the other projects I have on my needles or on my queue. So why rush things? I also saw a lot of people knitting projects this year with their Advent calendars from last year. So I may just do that because I enjoyed opening this without the stress of trying to fit it into a project this month. And then it also came with a candle. It also came with this Turkish Delight scented candle from Skein and the Stitch, and it smells so good, and it has like a really pretty, you see like gold on the top as like a covering, and it smells so good. It has like a rosy chocolatey scent, and I don't generally like chocolate fragrances, but it really smells so good in this. Maybe this is why Edmund sold out his siblings. I remember growing up, I always wanted to know what Turkish Delight tasted like, because I'm like, could it be that good that Edmund gave up his siblings for it? And then when I finally tasted it as an adult, I'm like, I don't get it. But I'm an Edmund hater, so what do I know? This is going to be a very quick outro because it's getting so dark. The sunset isn't for another hour, but this is just why winter sucks. Anywho, if you made it this far into this video, thank you so much for watching and following along this chaotic podcast episode. I hope you have a lovely end of the year. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to follow and give it a like. I am unsure what my next video will be, either a reflection on 2024's Make 9 or next year's 2024 Make 9 / like knitting goals. I don't know if I'm going to make an everything I knit in 2024 video. Unless there's like a ton of people or like a strong demand for it, I probably won't, because I liked my like most worn sweaters of 2024 video. But yeah, if a lot of people want to see everything I knit in 2024, I could make that video. Okay, like I said, this is a very quick outro because I'm losing sun fast. So I will just say bye, happy holidays. Hope you have a happy and safe rest of the year and start to the new year. See you in 2025. Happy knitting. Bye.